mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of Apple TV Severance, entitled The You Are. This title is based upon the book that Mark's brother-in-law Rickon wrote, left for Mark on his doorstep, that Selvig then took to work. The team finds it and they start reading from it at work. One, it's contraband. There's supposed to be no other books there. But they find it, and by the end of the episode, both Mark and Dylan seem to be pretty obsessed with this book. Mark's reading it in the bathroom stall. Dylan is digging for it and finding it in Mark's desk and reading it in the office. I'm not really sure where they're going to go with this. I think it's serve as some sort of enlightening message about not being enslaved by your job. I think that's probably where we're going to go with this, but there appears to be a long way to go with that. But this episode, what I want to talk about the most is each of our characters, we learn a lot more about, I think, in this episode. Maybe Dylan not so much. And side note, I'm waiting for them to make Dylan more compelling. I don't like the idea of having all these compelling characters and then having Dylan there to simply serve as comic relief. I'm sure there's going to be something interesting that's going to be revealed about him and his outie and his past or whatever, but I kind of wish they found a way to make him compelling up to that point, as opposed to kind of mainly having him just serve as comic relief and providing kind of like background information about past events at the job or how the job works as far in ways that don't really matter, like waffle parties and shit like that. Like, I don't know. I want them to make Dylan as compelling as all the rest of the characters. But that aside, we learned a lot about each of the characters this week, and I think for me, my biggest takeaway is trauma. I'm thinking that, we already knew that Mark severed based upon his wife's death, and he's using that to kind of escape his grief so that he's not sad all day. He gets, 8-9 hours of time where he's not sad. I didn't want to assume that every character has some sort of trauma that not forced them, but made them want to sever. I didn't want to go there, but this episode kind of made me feel that way, and I'm going to get into why. So I want to start off with Helly. Obviously, Helly spends this entire episode pretty frantic, desperate, really wanting to get out, as she has all season. We open up this episode with her still in the break room. She went to the break room after her, I don't even want to necessarily call it an escape attempt. I think she was just trying to get a message out, but she ends up in the break room, and she's not being authentic with these apologies. I even wrote in my notes for last week's episode, like, she ain't never getting out of here. But, she says something like, I've read it 300 times, and then Milchick says 259 or something to that effect. And then eventually she starts crying and says she's sorry, which I'm at the time I'm thinking like, okay, she's faking it now. She's trying to actively fake it to get out. And he says, like, no paraphrasing, makes her read it again. And when she returns to the office, she says that she read it like 1,072 times before she was released. I wonder if that was a true number or if she was being hyperbolic to just say I had to read it a lot of times. Because, like, I don't know how she went from 259 when we're talking about a period that goes into the next day to where that second day when she returns and they start over again, she's now at 1,072 before she gets out. Like, it seems like she read it a whole lot of times on that next day. But I'm not here to nitpick the number of times, whether it's an authentic number or whether it's a number that she made up for dramatic effect. Either way, it serves the purpose of saying she had to read this a lot of times before she was even able to fake sincerity. So she finally gets back, and her next move is to grab a paper cutter and threaten to cut her fingers off unless she can record a video to her outie. She is allowed to do that. She records the video, and I love how with Helly twice in this episode, they showed her getting into the elevator, the door's closing, and then the door's opening, and it's the next day again, and she's there again, to kind of like give us the feeling of what it must be like to be one of these innies in the Severance wing, that feeling of like, I just left and now I'm here again, having no recollection of outside. And she's when she returns the next day, she has a different disc in her hand, and it's a video for her from her outie And her outie basically says, I'm a person, you're not. I make the decisions, you don't. If you cut my fingers off, it's going to be a problem. Like, she's very adamant about Helly not getting out of there. And I think, again, this ties into, I think, trauma that all of the characters have probably experienced that made them decide that they want to sever. I'm trying to decide where I want to go next. Okay, no, I'm going to save the trauma for later. So, still talking about Helly, by the end of the episode, her way out is that she decides to try to hang herself in the elevator. And I think we're, of course, meant to believe that this is successful, but I feel like it can't be. For one, there's so much more we need to know about her. What's her story? Why is she down there? Why is her outie so adamant about getting out? I want to know all of these things. So I'm wondering if either maybe somebody finds her before she dies, or if there's some aspect of this plan that we don't see where she has a plan to, like, say, hang herself for a certain period of time before she then severs that connection. Severs. Or if it's something like she starts the hanging right before the elevator doors close, and by the time the elevator doors open, now she's her outie hanging in an elevator, and that guy that works at security sees her and saves her, and it's essentially a way of sending a message without sending a message, which we know what she's been trying to do that all season, trying to send a message to her outie. She does it with the video. It doesn't work. Maybe this will. So I'm assuming that she's not going to be dead and that we're going to see Helly in some form or fashion throughout the rest of the season. I feel like we have a lot to learn about her. Secondly, and this is going to kind of segue into my a little bit more into my trauma theory. During her break room experience, she says something like a muffled voice of a man or something like that. And then when she gets out, she's discussing it with Dylan, and she's like, "What's up with the noises, the voices or something?" He's like, "Oh, you hear the baby too," or something like that. And she's like, "No, I hear a man." And then that's when I started to wonder if this is a shared trauma thing, because if different people hear different things when they're in the break room session, why would that be? That means that whatever they're hearing is personal and connected to them. And the only thing I could think of is that it could be it could be something related to the trauma that made them sever, and that trauma can then induce these apologetic, emotional, sad reactions, which will help them further apologize and be sincere in their break room session. So I think it's maybe a subliminal form of manipulation to play something a muffled version of something that will not make any sense to their innie, but will just inherently trigger emotions in that individual. And then that made me then take the next step. Okay, what traumas would everyone have had? So that kind of feeds into what we learn about the other characters in this episode. So maybe Dylan has some sort of trauma involving a baby. Maybe Helly has some sort of trauma involving a man. Could be a father. Could be a husband. Whatever. We know what Mark's trauma is. Irv. Do I want to go to Irv now? Yeah, we'll go to Irv now. So all season we've been seeing Irv is really he's drank the Kool-Aid on the company, period. But there's been, ever since they introduced Christopher Walken's character Bert, there's been this inherent kind of a connection between the two. They just seem to really be into each other. And I proposed earlier that they might have something romantic going on outside. And now I'm wondering if, sticking with my trauma theory here, if maybe those two were together as a couple on the outside, and say say they had a bad breakup. This is so Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Say they had a bad breakup, and they both, unbeknownst to one another, decide to sever so that they could spend that 8 hours, not thinking about what they dealt with the other person. And then maybe that's why they're so separated from one another, all this kind of stuff. And now just their love for one another that exists naturally within them is drawing them to one another within Lumen, even though they're not supposed to have any memory of one another. It's just what's built into them. and that's why this burgeoning relationship feels so natural for them. So I'm thinking that I'm wondering if that's what happens with what's happened with them. Kind of moving on to the trauma circle here. Mark, we see, is sculpting a tree in his wellness session. Earlier in the episode, we saw him drive out to a spot with like a crashed in kind of rail. It's like bent and distorted, and he touches this tree that has caution tape wrapped around it. So I think we're meant to assume here that his wife was in some sort of car accident, and that's what happened to her. And then also with Mark, aside from the trauma, he has a moment at Petey's funeral. He goes to Petey's funeral and he runs into Kobo / Selvig there, who's there to drill into Petey's head and take out his chip, which she successfully does, because of course they play music video, they play home videos at a funeral that involve loud music so that no one's gonna hear your drill. Of course they would do that, but she drills into his head, gets the chip out, and Mark is kind of just wandering around, not really sure why he's there. He meets both Petey's daughter June, who we heard Petey talk about earlier in the season, and his ex-wife. And again, back to the trauma. Was that Petey's trauma? His divorce from his wife? Did she maybe like take the kid, and maybe June was like living with her, so he didn't get to see June a lot? The purpose of showing the video at the funeral was to show the connection that he had with his daughter, why that would hurt him so much, and maybe that was his trauma that made him sever. 8 hours a day, I need to not be thinking about how I can't see June right now. So again, like once you insert this idea of trauma causing people to want to sever, you can easily find something for each of these characters except Dylan, because they don't spend time telling us about Dylan. They just kind of use him to serve as comic relief and provide information that kind of just helps build the scene as opposed to provide context to who Dylan is. So let's see, what else did I have here? Actually, I think that might be it. So we talked about Mark, Petey's funeral, his trauma with his wife. So we talked about that. Talked about Helly's situation. Talked about Petey possibly severing from his divorce. Mark's wellness session. Irv and Bert. Talked about that. So yeah, I guess that kind of is everything that I wanted to actually talk about. I really want to see what happens with Helly, so I feel like there's no way that she's dead. I figure it's probably going to be the last thing I said, that elevator is going to close, she's going to go through, and she's going to wake up as her outie self hanging from the elevator. That security guy is going to save her, and that's going to be the message that any Helly is going to be getting out. The question is going to be, what impact is it going to have, and what are we going to learn about Helly, and why her outie is so adamant about keeping her there and she's so adamant about getting out. I feel like with Petey, like likely his trauma is going to be what happened with his wife, maybe not being able to see his daughter. I do think that trauma is what's going to have driven each of these characters to do this procedure. A lot more to learn about Selvig / Koble. What is she doing with Mark outside of work? Why is she kind of like toying around with that? I don't know. It feels like it's playing with fire. I don't know why she's doing that. Why are they so adamant about getting Petey's chip, finding out about his severance or whatnot, and his what do they call it, reintegration or whatever process he went through, finding out about that. Where's the story there? We got to learn more about Dylan. I'm really hoping maybe him reading this book is going to trigger something in him, but he's giving me little hints. Like, why does he hate Bert so much? Is there some sort of issue with them outside that maybe is manifesting inside that neither one of them knows about, consciously, but there's something, again, built into them that they just are not, they're not at each other's throat, but that Dylan is at his throat. Is there going to be something there? And what's up with Mark? Is he going to make a decision to actually put some effort into finding out what's going on here? Which I think at this point he kind of has to do. We're 4 episodes in. He's going to end up seeing that Helly either successfully killed herself or tried to. He's going to come out of this wellness session in a different headspace. Maybe he's going to read some more of this book. But whatever it is, we've spent enough time, I think, building up Mark's motivations and what he's dealt with and why he might be making the decision he's making, why he's drank the Kool-Aid so much when he's there, but kind of feels like there's just something compelling him to search things out. Okay, we get the point now. I think episode 5, Mark needs to start actively trying to figure out what's going on. So I think I don't know how many episodes it's going to be, but we'll assume that episode 5 is around a midway point, and I think that should be time for us to really start pushing the story forward with Mark. But really enjoying this show, really enjoy this episode. It's super compelling, super cool, super weird. I'm loving it, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 5. Peace.